Well, good morning. I feel really ashamed to be here with such a name, Althusara, and not speaking Spanish. Well, I understand a little bit. Just before starting this presentation, I'd like just to make a hint to a book which was issued last year in the United States by Paul Krugman called End This Depression Now. We all know that Paul Krugman is in favor of state intervention in order to initiate growth and in order to maintain growth, which is, it's not just a question of initiating, it's to maintaining. You may notice that he used the word depression, whereas all the economists talk about great recession. It's just because he thinks that the level of unemployment in America, especially if you add precarious job, and especially in the Eurozone, is very much comparable to the level of depression. Raphael has given a world ranking of World Economy's ranking for 2060. Well, in COFAS, we are more concerned with the 6 future months. And so I'm going to talk about what is going to happen in 2013 and the main risk for companies. I will start with this graph, which is a tradition in a country conference to show. It shows the evolution of world growth, which is in green, and on the right-hand side you can see in red our forecast for world economy, which is 2.7%. And from this chart, we can have 3 lessons. The first one is that with the blue line you can see is the evolution of COFAS Payment Incident Index, and this evolution, of course, is very much correlated to the evolution of world growth. When world growth slows down or when it slumped dramatically, like in 2009, Payment Incident Index COFAS rise dramatically in 2009. The second thing is that since the second oil shock, which you can see, that's the rectangle at the top, we put the main crisis since the first oil shock. So since the second oil shock, expansion years between 2 different crises tend to be shorter. It was 7 years, 5 years, 3 years, and now in 2010 we thought we might have a recovery. And of course it's not a recovery, we are just in the same crisis, it's just different. And there is again a slowdown and a rise in COFAS Payment Incident Index. If we focus on the Eurozone, where we expect a recession of 0.4% after 0.5%, you can see on the right and on the left axis that the level of the public debt, on the bottom axis is the GDP growth, and we see that fiscal austerity doesn't prevent fiscal public debt to rise. So the country in red, which will be in recession, will see this year again their public debt level increase. Now, if we predict, we have quite the same kind of forecast as Claudia for Spain. We predict forecast a recession of 1.6%. Now, that means that public spending is not going to sustain growth this year. And that, what about household? When you look at household net wealth in the European countries we have chosen, you see that for the northern economies it is above largely 100% of GDP, and that for Italy too, and for Portugal too. As for Spain, the net wealth is just 65%. So in most of the, in many actually, northern economies in Italy and Portugal, there is room to spend, but the consumer do not spend, and the answer is just over there. The real wages evolution, you see the great contraction in the countries like Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Greece, even Luxembourg and Slovenia. And on the bottom axis, you have youth rate unemployment, and that's also a reason why households do not spend. They just expect their disposable income to lower, and they expect the youth unemployment rate to rise, so they don't untie the ties of their wallet. So nothing much is to expect from household consumption, except in Germany, if there is some impetus from Germany, but we'll see that later. Now, what about export? It was largely explained by Claudia. Exports are doing well in Spain. They were Exports were well in Portugal too, but it's slowing at the moment. But the share of emerging countries is still too low. That's what you see on the left-hand side. And Spain has got actually the same level of share of to emerging countries than Germany. So Spain is doing as well as Germany regarding the emerging countries. And the answer why that's competitiveness, of course, which has been regained in Spain, that's on the right-hand side. You don't see anything. Oh, sorry, I didn't move the, sorry. So you see, that's the share of exports to emerging countries, same level for Spain and Germany. And there on the right-hand side, you have the trends of the unit labor cost that was just already explained. For Spain, the labor cost has decreased by 5% in 4 years. But if you look at the blue line, which is Ireland, it has dramatically decreased by 17%. And actually, what we call the internal devaluation has quite succeeded in Ireland, because even if the wages were decreasing, prices also were decreasing. So spending was not that dynamic, but it was a little bit maintained, whereas in Spain, and in Italy too, not in Italy, in Portugal, prices are not decreasing. So its real wage evolution is very, very strong. We have here the cost of 1 hour work. In Germany, it is nearly 35 euro for an hour, and in Spain, it's 22.5 euro for an hour, whereas in Portugal it's 10.5% euro for an hour. So we have nothing to expect from. We have to expect a lot, sorry, from export. It will contribute positively to the growth in Spain, but it comes at a moment when the emerging countries are implementing protectionist measures in order to protect their own production, their local production. So, and companies, of course, prefer for the moment in the Eurozone to keep the cash in order to deleverage and to rebuild their margin. Now, if we look at how businesses are resilient, considering the deterioration of the environment, we have on the right-hand side the level of profit of a few companies, and we added the United States and the United Kingdom. And we have on the left-hand side, in green, the self-financing rate and the level of debt to GDP. We have 3 groups of country, United Kingdom and Spain. They have good profits, good level of profits. For Spain, remember, before the crisis, the level of profit was 5% to GDP. Now it is, as you can see, 14%. So all this cash is being piled up. It is not used to invest. And actually, when companies in Spain are asking for credit, when they say they ask for credit, it's to restructure their debt and not to hire, not to invest. So these results are a little bit of a fancy, because it doesn't show the reality of the real economy without hiring and without really investment. The level of debt remains quite high, so some job has to be made still to deleverage. Now you have the group of countries in the middle, that's France, Italy, and Portugal. Mediocre level of profits, low level of self-financing compared to United Kingdom and Spain. That means these countries are very vulnerable to bank credit. And on the top, and the debt, fortunately, is not that high. On the top, you have Germany and the United States. The 3 items are very good. Now, when we look at the credit risk of aggregated sectors, we see that on the lower side, high risk, three sectors are directly hit by the deceleration of consumption of household. That's agro-food, that's retail, that's construction. But you also have sectors, of course, indirectly affected by the deceleration of the consumption. And if you take construction and automotive, of course, steel, which is upstream, is in difficulty too. But the macroeconomic situation doesn't explain all the default we can see in some actors, in some sectors. If you take, for example, steel in northern Italy, you have a multitude of actors in this sector, and they didn't take the opportunity of expansion years just to merge and to be stronger in case of crisis. So we have credit risk on this kind of population. And if you take specialized retailer, some of them didn't take the opportunity of the technology revolution. They didn't adapt. And so they were not involved enough in e-commerce in order to resist the crisis. So that's the case of Virgin in France, and that is the case as well of HNV in Great Britain. Now, if we have a look to a few countries regarding the insolvabilities. Here you have a comparison on the left of the insolvency rate in France and in Germany. You see that in 2002, the ratio, that means the number of insolvency compared to the number of actors of businesses in each country, the ratio in 2002 was equal in France and in Germany. In Germany, it has decreased since then, thanks to, if I may say, Mr. Schroeder initiative and the arts measure concerning the evolution of wages. And it has decreased slowly to be just half what the ratio of France. Of course, it has decreased as well because we all know that SMEs are big in Germany. They are so financially robust. They have very stable external financing with the regional banks. But what helped a lot, of course, was export. And since the slump of 1902, exports have increased an annual average by nearly 10%. So that has helped reducing the insolvency ratio in Germany. But when a bankruptcy occurs in Germany, it is big and it costs a lot of money to suppliers. Here on the right-hand side, you have a few big bankruptcy last year in Germany. The first one, Schlecker Group, was doing a turnover of 6 billion euro, so that costed a lot of money to the suppliers working with this company. Now, for France, you see that's the blue line or black line on the left chart on the bottom. It's rather stable anyway. It's above the pre-level crisis, and we expect for this year a contraction of household consumption in France. That will be the first time for nearly 30 years. And we expect an increase in insolvency in France by 2%. Now you see that since December 2011, the cost to suppliers has been higher, that's the orange line, because intermediary and big company went bankrupt after the trend in SMEs just before. And of course, it costed a lot of money to jobs, a lot of losses in jobs. On the contrary of Germany, of course, bankruptcy are very much linked to the consumption of households. And on the right-hand side, you see that when consumption rises, bankruptcy decreases, and vice versa. Now, for Spain, which is in blue, Italy in green, and Portugal in ochre, the bankruptcy are still very high, and they are above the pre-crisis level. As we have seen, they are in Spain, companies are rather trapped in the debt trap. But there are some good piece of news anyway, because foreign direct investment is coming back. And also there are negotiations with Germany, between Spain and Germany, in order to lend to SMEs in Spain with the guarantee of a German public bank. So if that is achieved, I think that will be a very good sign for investors in Spain. There is also a negotiation with the European Bank of Investment for this bank to invest in the SMEs, hiring young people. So there are some good hopes. But for Italy and Portugal, you see that bankruptcy are very high, with no self-financing level very high. Of course, they are very much dependent on credit, and you see the evolution on credit on the right-hand side. In Spain, it has decreased for household by nearly 4% in March, and for business by nearly 7%. So that's, of course, due to the reform implemented in order for banks to fix their balance sheet. We think the credit is not going to go back very soon. So there are risks on Spanish companies for COFAS at the moment. Now, two flickers of light at the end of the tunnel. Claudia talked about it too. The United States, we are a little bit more conservative than Caixa and than Rafael Pampillion, because we think the growth will be a 1.5% this year. We include in this forecast the non-resolution of a part of the famous sequester, which is the automatic spending, public spending cut, which has been implemented since the 1st of March. So, the cuts are on work at the moment. Of course, spending, which is in blue, that's on the right-hand side of the left chart, household spending is very dynamic at the moment, but one has to be very cautious with the consumption of household in America, because when they consume with dynamism, it's because they draw on their saving rate. The saving rate before the crisis was nearly around 2%. Just after the crisis, it went up to 6%, and then it just went yo-yo. So spending, for example, when the iPhone was on the market, the level of savings of the American household just decreased. And then it has increased last year in December because the bonuses were all paid at once in order to avoid the increase in tax in 2014. So consuming was very, very high at the first quarter, but the level of the saving level has decreased to 2.7%. So that explains spending. You always have to look as well at the price of the gasoline, because that's also something which push households in America not to spend as much as they would like. Of course, housing is regaining some stance, but prices are increasing, but nobody, of course, wants to see the prices going up to the level of 2007, because that would mean we would be again in a bubble. But the wealth of households in America is on an uptrend because of all the investment and the liquidity going into equities in the United States, which make their wealth more important. So we don't have to expect anything from public spending, of course, and you see that it's a negative contribution this year because of one very, very important moment which will come in August, September, October, which will be, again, like in 2011, the discussion around the level of the public debt in the United States. And just remember that in 2011, the United States has lost its AAA by Standard & Poor's at that occasion because Democrats and Conservative and Republicans couldn't agree. And so Standard & Poor's just gave a warning by downgrading the United States. Another flicker of light is Japan. Here you have, because we talk of average data. And in average data, of course, you have big companies. But when you look at SMEs, look at in the United States, which is the blue line. SMEs is confidence is very volatile, and it is on a downtrend. In Japan, SMEs were not at all profitable before the crisis. The crisis was very harsh for them. They usually have just one client, which is a big multinational. With Fukushima and so on, the big multinational have gone to other countries, even for their, how do you call that, the spare parts for final products. So they are quite in difficulties. Of course, the depreciation of the yen is a very good news for multinational companies, but for SMEs, which are not exporters, the bill is going to be very high because, of course, as you know, Japan is compelled to import most of its energy, and energy is built in dollar. Now, first I have to explain to you rapidly, sorry, this is it. What is COFAS country assessment? It's very short term. It assesses the average risk of companies in a given country in the framework of their current affair, which is short-term trade. That's 6-month credit. It is built with country risk department analysis from a political, macroeconomical, and financial point of view. It includes as well the evolution of payment incident index for COFAS all over the world, and it includes as well a business climate assessment, which is an assessment by itself, which you could check on our website. If you want to export somewhere, just look at the business climate, and it's very important, and you see what is our rating. And here you have on our assessment for main advanced economies. We have downgraded in March Belgium, France, and Netherlands to A3 because of the rise in payment incident, because of sluggish growth. We had downgraded Spain in January to B because of the narrowing of the company's margin and so on, well, whatever we have discussed just until now. And we had downgraded Portugal in B last year in March. Now, if we go to emerging countries, is that okay? So they were quite resilient to the Eurozone. We forecast 5.1% growth in 2013. That's what you can see on the right-hand side, with a progression mainly, but of less than just 1 percentage point in emerging Asia, in Latin America, and in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's come to what Raphael Pampillon said, the growth are very good in Africa. But they have strengthened. They proved during the crisis that they could react very positively and reactively with their fiscal and monetary policy. But they have another strength, which is the expansion of the middle classes in their country, which support, of course, the growth. And we will see that this expansion is also a vulnerability. So they are not invulnerable, and we have listed 5 vulnerabilities. One which is quite typical of the country risk analysis, which is the external vulnerability. On the left-hand side, you see the GDP growth, and on the basis axis, you see trade openness, that is to say, what is the exports on GDP ratio. You see that, without surprise, Asian companies have successfully resisted to the crisis. Indonesia and Philippines on the left-hand side, thanks to their very narrow trade openness. And on the right-hand side, you see Thailand and Malaysia, which are countries very open to the rest of the world, but they resisted, they were resilient thanks to the budgetary policy, which was very strong. But on the reverse, you see on the bottom line right, Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Hungary. They are very open to the Eurozone, and that's the reason why their GDP growth will be negative, because of this openness to the Eurozone. The external vulnerability is also from a financial point of view. But things are quite all right if we consider the FDI flows to BRICS, Portugal, and Turkey. Bottom side, you see the outflows. Up, it's the inflows, and the red line is the net result. And you see that it is decreasing, but it is not slumping. That's good news. And on the right-hand side, you see the exposure of European banks to the main emerging areas. It is too decreasing, but it is not slumping. And actually, for Central Europe, which might be a concern, because as you see, the exposure is very high, so it proves the openness of the area to the Eurozone. In Central Europe, there was agreement between Western banks and these countries in Vienna recently not to withdraw too much their exposure in order to sustain growth in this area. Now, of course, when you have a risk of shortage of external financing, and that's also very often the key point for emerging countries, because usually their current account balance is negative, you need to develop your own domestic credit market. And when you look at the left-hand side, you have the credit to private sector, to GDP. You have 3 groups of countries. On the top, China and Vietnam, it's an oversized domestic credit market. Because, of course, it has sustained growth in these 2 countries, but it has also increased bad loans in the balance sheet of public banks in China, for example. And so the challenge for China is to limit the progression of the credit, and it is also to implement good practice in order to avoid a banking systemic crisis in case of a rising. It's okay? On the right-hand side, you see that I have just to say a word about the bottom side. Argentina, Algeria, it's undersized because investment is very poor in Argentina, and in Algeria, the private sector is very small compared to the oil rent. Whereas in the middle, you have Brazil, India, Turkey, Russia. It seems quite a good average, but when you look at the right-hand side, you see that Russia, Turkey, and India are increasing very much, corporates are increasing very much their debt abroad in international market. And that's dangerous for two reasons, because first, it's a fact of very important companies, and they are just a small number. And the second risk is that, of course, they leverage in foreign currency, and that exposes them to a foreign exchange risk. To come to the fourth vulnerability, just check that in emerging countries, on the average, the public finances are very good. The public debt is in green. It's very small compared to the GDP. We put in comparison the public debt of the advanced economies, and you see the result. On the right-hand side, foreign exchange risk. Foreign exchange reserves are very high, $7 trillion, and half of this is just for China. So China is a good sovereign risk. But when you have a contract with a company of a public sector, just be careful that if you think the company could be bailed out in case of difficulty, it will be bailed out and only if the guarantee is in the contract, the guarantee of the state. Here you have very large failures of a public society or bank because borrowers and lenders thought that the state would bail the company. And the most famous one is BTA in Kazakhstan, who failed twice. Now, Claudia talked about that a little bit. It's in China. China is a very good sovereign risk, but you see that it has to shift its model because investment, which is in green, has gone up very, very quickly. That's due to this very big stimulus of 2009, and that household consumption is decreasing. So authorities have difficulties to transmit. I don't know if it's the word in English, to transmit their own policy, the economic policy in the real economy. And you see on the right-hand side the evolution of credit. You remember I said the challenge for Chinese authorities to limit the credit. Since 2009, they succeeded. It's the green thing. But household and corporate just go around the directives, and they go to what we call the shadow banking or the social banking. And this social banking is very, again, dangerous because it is with very, 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 very high interest rate. You have no idea how high they are. They are usually rate, and also it entertains overcapacities and zombie companies, small companies who have no financial strength. And there you see, for example, if you say cement and steel, you see that in China, just 5 top companies do produce 27% of the national production, whereas in South Korea and Japan, less numerous actors, 2 and 3, produce between 70 and 81%. And the last vulnerability is the governance. Remember I talked about one of the strengths of the emerging countries, the expansion of the middle classes, but it is also a vulnerability coming. It's not a new vulnerability, but it is coming a burning question because of the middle classes who ask the state and the public institution to give account for their acts. And after the Arab Spring, we had protests in Russia. We had a demonstration in India against the violence done to women. We have demonstration in Bangladesh because of the insecurity in government plans. So that has become a very acute problem in emerging countries, and probably one of the most important ones. And if we focus on 30 emerging countries here, you see in the round circle the countries which are susceptible to have social tension in the future. When you compare tools for change, that's tool for change is, you know, the degree of internet, of education, the women fertility and so on. And pressure is the level of GDP, inflation and so on. So if we have a look very rapidly to our assessment, you see that in emerging Europe, Slovenia, we have put a negative watch on Poland, Slovenia, and Czech Republic for the reason I've already explained concerning their external vulnerability. That in Tunisia, we had put a negative watch because of the difficulty of the transition. And in South Africa, we put a negative watch in January because of the strikes, the sluggish growth, and the problem of payment incident in this country. So now, if you want to look all the assessment we write on 158 countries, and our ratings for business climate and for country risk, you just go on our site and you have all that. I thank you very much for your attention.